Hello, my friends. I just wanted to drop some special bonus episodes into the feed that you probably have not heard unless you are a part or an early part of the Patreon for the Life Shift podcast. If you don't know, I do have a Patreon. It currently only has two tiers. One is a $3 a month tier just to support what I'm doing, helps cover production costs. And then there's a $5 tier, which will get you episodes early and just the, I guess, warm fuzzies for helping me out with the Life Shift podcast. But I used to have other tiers where people were so generous and were offering additional money each month to get bonus episodes and possible winnings of t-shirts and all sorts of things. And then I realized a couple months ago that I wasn't able to deliver what I wanted to, especially for those of you that were giving me the extra money. So right now we're just kind of doing the early episodes. You'll always get those. So if you want to support the Life Shift podcast, please jump over to patreon.com/the Life Shift podcast, and you can find that information there. But I come on here because I want to share a series of these bonus episodes that I did early on in the Patreon journey. There are like 20 plus episodes in which I had bonus recordings with previous guests. So I would go back and we would have a conversation about the experience of sharing their story on the Life Shift podcast, catch up on anything. And I think these are super important. And I know most of them did not see the light of day from outside of the Patreon. So I'm going to be dropping these episodes. Whatever you're listening to now is another episode. So I'm going to use the same intro for all of them. But here is one of the bonus episodes with a former guest from the Life Shift podcast. And if you like this, let me know because I'm thinking of bringing some of this back and talking to previous guests as I go into year 4. So enjoy this bonus episode that was once released on the Patreon feed. I'm Matt Gilhooly, and this is The Life Shift, candid conversations about the pivotal moments that have changed lives forever. Hello, Olivia.
Hi, how are you?
Good. It's so weird because we never talk.
Never, not at all. And I didn't have withdrawal symptoms when you were away for the week and seeing Broadway shows back to back or anything.
So if you're listening, Olivia was on episode 75, and
Good number.
think I just released episode 120. So I'm not quite sure where life has gone.
I don't know. Yeah, that's a lot of episodes, Matt.
Well, you just passed 100 too with a fresh story. So congratulations with that.
Yeah. It's a lot of work. I'm tired.
It's nuts. Yeah, I understand that. We recorded your episode April 28th, 2023. And then it came out August 15th, 2023. And now we are in March 2024.
Wow.
You know, it's crazy. And you have your story. I feel like you share your story in so many ways and so many platforms. And I was just honored that you wanted to kind of go through that journey in the Life Shift format, if you will, of like, what was that, that significant, smallest moment we could pinpoint and determine, like, where did everything change? Because you had a lot of a buildup. You had a lot of a buildup, but then there seemingly was a kind of like a small-ish moment. Maybe you can remind us of what your moment was.
Yeah, it was a lot of buildup of a toxic relationship. And then the moment was cooking dinner when my ex-husband said he had to leave, right? So that was like it. That was the moment. I'm on a lot of podcasts. I love to guest on podcasts. But you have the unique experience of being my friend as well. And so not only do you provide a safe space for people that they can come and talk on your podcast, but I felt doubly safe because you already kind of knew some of my story and I knew that I could share freely without being judged and without being shamed. And I think to date, I probably have shared more on your podcast than any other podcast that I've ever, including my own, that I've ever talked about.
Well, I think it's important because your story, although unique to you, I don't think is unique to, unfortunately, to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And, what you guys do with the Fresh Starts and a fresh story, and just kind of bringing these stories to light and sharing that like any change in your life can be a positive one, even if it stems from something negative. And I love that reframing and what you guys do, you and your sister, who's also been on the podcast, sharing another similar story, unfortunately. And,
It's true. It's true. I was just thinking about that this morning because divorce is like having a hot moment right now in the news. I've been thinking a lot about the way that we talk about divorce specifically at Fresh Starts. And I always want people to understand and realize that there is such a beautiful, positive way to reframe your divorce. Not that divorce isn't hard. Like, divorce is really hard. The process is hard. The healing is super hard. But so much of divorce is both and, right? You can both go through this really traumatic process and find joy at the end of it, and find moments of joy within the process, and feel really, peaceful with the decision that you made. So when you can reframe divorce as a positive decision that you make in your life, which is hard. And we have a lot of people that will say to us, but what if it wasn't my decision, right? And it's never easy to make a big decision about your life. And it's never easy to go through a legal battle with a person that you thought you were signing up to live the rest of your life with, right? Like, nobody's saying that's easy. But when we can reframe divorce as kind of the second act of our life and say, like, okay, now we can make the decisions for our joy and our children's joy, and we can move forward. And I'm very sensitive to divorce stories that are, right, I would like to say, like, kind of trapped in the past, right? And there's like a lot, rightfully so, a lot of anger surrounding a lot of divorce stories. And I was just thinking this morning, like, I feel like it's okay to remind people, like, you don't need to be angry forever, right? Like, you can move on. And that's so much of what we do at Fresh Starts.
But you also can be angry in the moment, and you're allowed to
Totally.
feel sad and angry and all these emotions because we're human. And I think that's just natural. And I think society has also set up divorce as something that it's not. And, I think it's created like this shame. And I think a lot of that's tied to religion and things like that. But also in the sense of like, people just change over their lives. And sometimes you don't change in the same direction as the person that you're married to. And that's okay. I mean, relationships before marriage end and change. And so, I think this contract, if you will, of marriage kind of changes perspective, but it's really no different.
It's wild when you actually take a second to think about it, right? Because you have different friends your whole life. You have friendships that end and friendships that start and friendships that ebb and flow. And yet we're culturally told, but also you have to find the one person you're going to spend the rest of your life with. And just because we're, really historically it's a heterosexual marriage to have children, right, and propagate the universe, but why do we shame people for wanting to change that relationship or transition into a divorce? Because the relationship doesn't end, especially if you have children. It just transitions into a different kind of relationship. And so, it's wild that we kind of have decided that this box people have to live in. I mean, I know you're all about those check boxes and all those things, right? It's like, yes, we can have colleagues that, come and go, and friends that come and go, but you have to find one person.
It's so weird, yeah.
It's a very weird concept, yeah.
But I mean, I guess it's not probably going anywhere. So I love that you guys are putting into the world that like this can be a fresh start in a positive way. Of course, there is going to be quote unquote baggage or things that come with it, but you don't have to carry that forever. There are things that you can let go eventually when you are ready. And to that point, I know you don't listen to a lot of the episodes of shows that you're on, but I know that you did listen to
I did.
This one. How did you feel listening to you tell your own story in this way?
Well, it's funny you say that because we were just on a podcast yesterday and my whole family was like, it was so good. And I was like, I didn't listen to it, but I did listen. I listened to your podcast and I listened to this episode. Well, first of all, I think the number one thing that came up for me was how well you hold space for people. I just have to put that on you for a second, because I think the people that come on wouldn't feel safe, wouldn't share their stories if it wasn't for the atmosphere you set. So that was the number one takeaway that I had. But I think, again, like you said, my story is not that unique. And so it was important for me to be honest about it. and share it on a platform that I know other people who listen to your podcast would maybe learn something, or, you probably get an audience of people that want to dig deep into these conversations. And so I was really happy, obviously, with the way that the episode came out. I thought it was beautiful. I think you set a tone of such calm and peace. And so it made it easy to be calm and share my story and remember every part that I had to remember. And I love that it was centered around this one moment, which did change my life. And, with divorce, especially, because divorce can go on for a long time and the process is long, and you kind of have these different milestones that you go through with divorce. Like the moment that he decides to leave, and then the moment he actually does leave, and then the moment you sign your papers, right? And so I love that you kind of forced me to pick that one moment and work up to that.
I think it's always interesting to, I hear this from other people, and I wonder if you experience this, is sometimes we tell our stories, but we only tell it in chunks, and they're little chunks here, but we don't really tell it from here to here, or like beginning to not end, but a particular ending. And so like when I listened to my own episode that I had my friend guest host, it was so interesting to hear it from that perspective. And I wonder if telling your story in that long space was a little weird for you.
I think it was cool, right? It was cool to kind of see it from like an overhead point of view. I am a clinical hypnotherapist, and one of the modalities I do with people is called time techniques. And you kind of go into this hypnotic space and you go up above your timeline of your life, and you get to rearrange things because everything is just a story. Like, spoiler alert, everything about us is just a story. We can rewrite those stories. And so it was kind of reminding me of that, right? It's like you get to float above your timeline and see their story in kind of this big chunk. And it's really cool to see that.
It's unique for you because this is like a lot of my guests maybe haven't told their story before, but your whole business is really because of your story.
Yeah.
And so most people that probably listen to this episode have heard your story in some way. Did you get any feedback from anyone that was like kind of unique or stood out to you?
I mean, I definitely did, because I think that it was the first time I told it in its entirety, like you said. And so I had a lot of people that were like, I didn't know these parts of the story, or like that made sense. Like once, kind of I put the whole thing together. And it's interesting telling my story too, because I always am very aware that I'm telling my story and not anybody else's story. And so, it was interesting to really see it like from the whole story from my perspective. And I think other people really enjoyed learning more about, like, I don't share, it's funny. I'm a very much an open book, and I share everything on social media. Like I talk about everything, except I don't always share parts of this particular story. And I don't know if it's a conscious thing, because like I save it for podcasts or my book someday or whatever. I also think, I don't know, as public as I am, there's parts of the story that are really hard to talk about. And so it's good to have a safe space to do that.
There's a lot of hard parts of a lot of people's stories. And I think the more that we share ours, the more safe other people feel sharing theirs, because like you said, where all of our lives are a story, right? And it's not always going to be up at the top. We're not always going to be at these hills and these mountains and these wonderful things that we can celebrate. In fact, a lot of the time, or most of the time, we're on the way down trying to like figure out how to get back up. And I think those are the places in which we can relate to each other the most, right? And so, hopefully we start flipping this more, so that not to say that we want to like tell everyone our dirty laundry and everything is terrible and the whole world is falling apart, which it may be, but I think those are the moments in which we can relate to each other the most, and then find hope when one of us or a couple of us start to find our way back up.
100%. You have to hear other people's stories to know that you can make it through your own story too. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been a while since we've recorded. What's changed in your life since April 2023?
Okay. So since almost a year ago, well, we released a book that we love called Simple Scripts to Support Your People. And then 4 months later, the book did very well. We self-published the book, but it sold over 700 copies, which is like unheard of for a self-published book in 4 months. And then 4 months later-ish, a literary agent dropped into our laps And we are working on a book proposal for him, but we had to pull our original book off the market so we could work on this other book because of book bureaucracy things. So we actually have put all the scripts on the website. So there's now 200 scripts for free up on Fresh Starts, registry.com. And I don't know what else is happening. I mean, so many things. We have amazing experts. We now have about 120 plus experts in our expert community, one of which is
so
you.
Much.
We're growing it very quickly. I don't know. We're just constantly, we had a podcast cohort. I don't know. It's just a lot.
Yeah,
it's a lot, but it's all good things. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's happening really rapidly. Your kids are growing quickly. And
they are. I know. This summer they'll be 11 and 8, which is like fucking crazy. I don't know.
Yeah. And I think it's something to be said. Like you said, like your company is not just about divorce, right? Your company is about fresh starts. Naturally, there's a lot of talk going on now about divorce and how the millennials are going to start to get divorced in a more rapid rate. Like we're going to see a higher amount coming soon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And our book is not about divorce. Our book that we're writing right now is about fresh starts. And so, we see a lot of people who come to Fresh Starts for so many things. Right now, we have a lot of job loss, a lot of job change, widows, people who just want some sort of change in their life, right? That life shift.
I think the pandemic brought it too.
The pandemic brought out a lot. It's interesting because now we're 4 years this week, right? 4 years post-pandemic launch. And I think people are kind of just figuring stuff out now of like, wait, I actually don't want to be in this relationship or this job or this place. We get a lot of people that are making big moves. So much of what we do at Fresh Starts and what our book is about is really like giving people the permission, right, to like make these big decisions on their own, which is scary.
And be proud about them.
Yeah. And like to figure out the journey forward, right? As you make these decisions and how to get where you want to go.
Yeah. I think you take the stigma out of a lot of these big changes. I think even changes that maybe on the surface don't seem shameful or things that people want to hide, they still do, because I think we're conditioned in a sense that we want other people to approve of what we're doing or not doubt us.
It's interesting too, Matt, because now that you say that, I'm thinking we have a lot of like women especially that will come to us and they're like, I just bought my own house. Like, do I get to celebrate? Like, do I get a party? Right. I think we compare everything we do to babies and weddings, right? How does it stand up to a baby or wedding, right? Is it enough celebration? Do I not talk about it, right? I graduated my PhD, whatever it is. It's like, is that good enough? And so much of what we do is being like, yes, like there's so much more to life than babies and weddings. And you're allowed to celebrate it all. And you're allowed to have a registry for it and a party. And yeah, just giving people their permission.
You can do whatever you want. It's your life.
There's no rules. There are literally no rules. This is all made up.
It's your story.
Time is made up. Everything is made up.
I love that. And I think you're putting so much positivity into the world and destigmatizing things that shouldn't have a stigma anyway. And so I think as we move forward with it, I think it's a wonderful thing for people to consider. And of course, people listening will include the links to what you do. I'm wondering, like on the podcast front, when you go to listen, I know you're super busy and you probably don't have a lot of time to listen to shows.
Yeah,
just in general. What kind of stories do you gravitate towards in any kind of podcast that you listen to?
I love that question. I love your podcast. So I love all the stories. It's funny. I don't listen to as many as I used to. I listen to like a handful. So I'll tell you exactly who I listen to, your podcast. I listen to Time to Lean, which is with another one of our experts, Crystal Britt, and our friend Laura Danger, which is really focused on domestic equity and talking about household labor and mental labor. And it's not necessarily stories, but they break down a lot of like TikTok videos, and it's very interesting. I listen to Pop Culture Happy Hour while I'm doing something else. Smartless, if it's somebody that I like. And then that's pretty much it. Like not a ton of podcasts right now.
I asked that question because I find that I really gravitate towards stories that are very much like my own, because I think I'm curious.
Oh, another one. Yes, I listened to, I was going to say, we had another friend of ours launch a parenting podcast, Give It Time, but I you know what I'm going to say? I love when I know the people on the podcasts. Like I really try to listen. I really, really try to listen to my friends' podcasts. Or if my
It's
friend is
important.
on a podcast, I'll listen. Yeah. And it's exciting, right? It's like, oh, I know the person, or oh, like I get to support them. And I love to hear the perspectives of the people I love on podcasts. So, yeah, but I listen to our own podcast as I edit it. And so it is
That's enough.
a lot of podcasts. Yeah, a lot of podcasts. There's a couple other ones. Fine Beats and Cheeses, which is with our friends Leslie Streeter and Lynn Childress. That's a pop culture podcast. We just had them on our podcast because we're doing a sibling season coming up, which is I'm so excited about. It's exploring the sibling dynamics. And so we're having some really cool sibling sets coming on, and some past guests are bringing their siblings back. And so we had them on because they're twins, and they had one of them is a widow, and we talked about how the sisters supported each other like in that time. So I'm because Jenny and I, not shockingly, are fascinated by sibling dynamics. We wanted to do a sibling podcast before anything else. That years ago, we wanted to have one that was going to be called Had to Be There. And it was going to be about like growing up together and what that looked like. And then Kate and Oliver Hudson stole our podcast idea. So, but they can come on. I actually invited them on ours, but they haven't heard back.
Maybe they will. I'll put out some feelers out there for you.
We actually had our half sister come on. Our first episode is with our half sister, which was a really beautiful episode and sad and interesting. And I think people will really, I think, learn a lot from it because a lot of people have half siblings and we don't really talk about how weird that can be. And so it's going to be, the next season is more, we're calling them fresh conversations because they're not just fresh stories, but the fresh start stories, but they're kind of different topics. So we have one about how dating apps are a scam. We have kind of like about a lot of beautiful stories about marriage, fresh starts, and how you can kind of come back from low times of marriage, which I love. And then we'll have the sibling season and then more conversations. So it's how quickly you kind of book up for the rest of the year. It's like, well, there goes that. So now I just have to edit everything.
Speaking of weird, isn't it weird? I don't know if you're finding this. I think it's weird that people seem to be more open and free sharing their ideas on a recorded podcast than maybe they would be in person, face to face.
100%. And it's funny. We've had a couple wonderful inventors and innovators on the podcast. And when I say, like, what's coming up next for you? They'll share without thinking, like, patent ideas or, like, things that they shouldn't be talking about. And they're like, oh, no, can you, like, edit that out? And I'm like, yeah, totally. Yeah, I think, Matt, you and I talk about this a lot. And I just saw somebody tweet about this. But, like, being a podcast host is so much more than being a podcast host, right? It's like being a therapist and holding space and trauma. And I mean, we did our whole season on child loss. For October was pregnancy and infant loss awareness. And you were a huge support to me during that season because those were some heavy stories that I had to hold. And it's not just about holding the space while you record, it's putting the episode out and making sure you're honoring. And in this case, it was a dead child, right? And so that was probably one of the proudest pieces that whole season. I will never be prouder of anything I think that we put out. And in full transparency, I didn't even care what our listeners were. Like, I didn't care how many we got. But I will say we got some beautiful messages from, the women that shared their stories were so brave. And we got some messages from their family members that were like, thank you for letting them share their stories. Like, and so I will never forget that, doing that. It changed me. It absolutely changed me.
I think there's so much value in not the episode actually going out, but being able to hold a space for someone to just let their story out. Because then sometimes they've never said it out loud. It's been in their head or they've written it on a piece of paper. I've had episodes that don't sound as good as I want them to, actually the audio of it. But I find the story so important that it's like, I can't not put this out there. One, because this person needs to hear themselves tell the story more than anyone else hearing it, right? And so there's so much value there. And I think it's this weird space as a podcast host, creator, whatever we call ourselves, that it's like you have this battle of like, what do I cut out? Or where do I put this? Or, when do I put this out? How can I put this out even if it doesn't sound great? And all these things. And I think to your point of like that season with child loss and pregnancy loss, those stories were probably so important for them to say out loud, to just.
Yeah, it's interesting. 100%. And and I'm sure you've had this too. We've had people share really tragic stories. And sometimes, with tragedy comes, you have to distance yourself from it. And sometimes people will say things and I'm like, oh, that's not going to come off the way you think it's going to come off to the public, right? And so I don't edit anybody's story, but I do want them to be perceived as I understood what they were saying, right? But it's like if you don't listen to maybe the whole episode or you don't understand the full context, it might sound flippant. And so I've definitely had to kind of figure that situation out sometimes too.
Well, I think what you guys are doing is beautiful. I think
Thank you.
the space that you hold, I love that you're doing thematic seasons now with the show
fun.
and
It's
kind
fun.
of creating that.
Yeah.
I think it also, as hard as it can be with whatever topic you choose, I think it's also really interesting for you to spend that time in that space.
It is because I have ADD and I can't, I get bored, I'm like, I love the conversations. I could keep going with conversations all the time. But what we found is that people, it's not just that they have fresh start stories, but they have fresh ideas, right? And so we're like, well, bring us your fresh ideas, bring us the conversations nobody else wants to talk about. And that's what we absolutely love. But I enjoy the thematic. There's a part of me, I used to be a journalist and, I'm a writer. And so part of me loves that like NPR style, digging in and, having the thematic seasons. So I don't know what we're going to do next year, but we'll figure it out. It usually comes to us.
Don't worry about it. You got enough on your plate.
It's interesting. Usually somebody will say something and I'm like, oh, that would be a really cool idea for a season. We have a couple people that wanted to do a whole season about widows and, so we'll see what comes up.
Hey, don't worry about it. I think you have enough on your plate right now.
I don't have enough on my plate, Matt. I have to always.
Never enough.
Never enough.
So to kind of wrap up this conversation, I'm wondering if there's someone that's out there that listens to podcasts that has a story but never really shares it publicly. Is there anything that you would want to advise them about starting to share their story or any like tiptoeing in? Is there any advice you have?
I always say like when it comes to sharing your story, really like start journaling about the story from your perspective, right? Because I think so much of our hesitation with sharing stories is we don't want to project what we thought the other person was thinking into the story. And so really try to, I literally look at it in my head like a movie scene, right? And it's like, well, what was I doing? Where was I? What was I thinking? And kind of erasing that other person out of the scene and just seeing yourself through that will help figure out how you can tell your story with grace.
And also know that like you don't have to share it on a podcast. You can share it with a friend. You can share it with a stranger. You can share it however you need
to. And journaling is a wonderful way to get it out of your body.
Out of your head.
Always, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Or drawing, or art, yeah.
Yeah, any kind of creative outlet I think is really helpful for any kind of processing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, no, I don't do a voice note. I'll do a podcast, but I won't do a voice note.
Well, just to get out of your body.
If people want to like get into your orbit, what's the best way to do that? Yeah,
you can go to freshstartsregistry.com. We're Fresh Starts Registry on Instagram. And my personal handle is The Digital Yenta. And you can always DM me and say hi.
Yeah, and she loves it, by the way.
I do. I love it. I'm a big Yenta.
She likes to connect and cheerlead and all these things. So thank you for being a guest and a friend and a everyday podcast, everyday texter, but not when I'm in New York. Sorry.
No, sorry. You were too busy seeing all the Broadway shows.
Well, thank you for doing this. And those of you listening, thank you for supporting the Patreon community. And I'll be back next month with another bonus episode. For more information, please visit www.thelifeshiftpodcast.com.